Yes, I'm just sending it to the people who wanted it on this, obviously on this laptop. Tweet. Just tweet it from my account. Plus tweets.
Yeah, or aye.
Well, what do you want to do? I don't have access to it, so either I can send you a link privately and you can tweet it.
No, we'll
Or
retweet it. It'll be fine.
Yes. Okay. I do.
Oh, you're trying to get this up so you can live stream it.
Yes. Okay, Michael's, can you retweet from GlasgowPHP?
Oh, right, okay.
Oh, hold on, did I do it right? Let me see.
Yep.
I don't know if I put all the right things in it.
Just make sure, yeah. Just make sure you put it right. And
yeah, okay. Well, I just tagged GlasgowPHP. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you go to YouTube, so it's live. It's recording me right now, so I should probably stop talking. And then we have to figure out where to put it. So it's quite close. Let's see.
Oh, right.
Improvised dolly there.
Okay, everyone have a seat. We're just about to start. So welcome everyone to the next GlasgowPHP meetup. I see some familiar faces, I see some new faces, which is fantastic. It's all about passion about GlasgowPHP and PHP, obviously. This event is possible to the continuous support of SCV Plymouth. Thank you so much for fabulous drinks and lovely delicious pizzas. And this month's talk is ethical engineering. We're pleased to welcome Chris Hoult tonight, and he'll be talking about situations when we as engineers focus on providing solutions to problems at hand that we might face every day. And quite often we overlook problems that the solution itself might cause, well, might cause problems. So I think it will be a really insightful and interesting talk. So this will be in just a second, but first I'd like you all to draw a raffle ticket from the hat that Michael's just providing right now. Okay, and get ready, please make sure to help yourself to a ticket. Just one, Derek. And we'll be giving away some prizes. This will be a JetBrains voucher tonight and a couple of different things from SaltStack and Voucher. Yeah, so just a couple of more seconds. Do hurry. Yeah, we're almost there. Yes, obviously help yourself to some beer. Yeah, get comfortable, sit back, and please put your hands together for Chris Hoult.
hello. Yes, I'm Chris Hoult. And this is ethical engineering. Yeah. Cool. This is still a work in progress, so if at any point I say something egregious, just shove your hand up and give us a shout. There's going to be time for questions, discussion, whatever afterwards, but I'm really interested in hearing what you guys think and what you think about the things that I bring up. So just give a shout and join in. Who am I? I'm currently a kind of engineering team lead at DataSift. I look after the public web application, public API, and do a few things internally as well. And I use PHP for that, so to provide a website and to provide the actual API that we do. I've been there for 3.5 years now. Prior to that, I was at Time Out, the magazine and not the biscuit. And prior to that, I was at a little agency doing CRM systems called Pure Innovation. We had a wonderful customer up here in Glasgow who bought the system off us and then went bust, no connection. I'm also founder and organizer of PHP Berkshire, user group down there, and we've been going for about 6 months so far. I also act. I also shave. Although I only shave to act. I don't act to shave. So, ethics. Some I think people got the joke. What is ethics? Ethics is kind of a set of moral frameworks, of guidelines, a way in which we can organize ourselves and our thoughts and our processes to make a decision between right and wrong. We might be able to define right and wrong in a kind of a general sense in our head, but ethics are the thing that actually helps us kind of make a decision off the back of that. They're very important. Sometimes the stuff that we build can kill people. Sometimes it can injure them. Sometimes it can damage their reputation and cause immense trouble for them by use of either them using our software or our software existing in the first place. So one of my thoughts behind doing this talk is about trying to make people think about how we make these choices and think about how our decisions and how the things we build impact on others. I'm going to go through a bunch of different frameworks for kind of ethics and morality, and then I'm going to go into a few kind of discussion points that, again, you're more than welcome to pipe up in, and also a couple of thought experiments, which will hopefully be internalized, but I'll externalize a couple of those. So, first off, ethics as a framework for morality, as a framework for making decisions right and wrong. We've got a bunch of different ways in which we do this. We can use absolute morality, and that is where you have a set of defined laws, like the 10 Commandments. You have a set of very specific, thou shalt not kill, which is very easy to follow, right? It's very easy to actually go, well, I shouldn't kill that person, therefore I won't kill that person. That's right and wrong. And it's really easy to say, thou shalt not steal, and follow those rules. The problem with those being specific laws and very strict black and white things is they very quickly start to build up as you add more and more, and they start to become contradictory if you're not careful. So you see, so not only would you have the fact that thou shalt not kill as one of the commandments, as I understand it, actually just meant thou shalt not kill your friend, as opposed to it's okay to go to war against that other tribe over there. And you start building up potentially the problem of cognitive dissonance, of how can we do this? We've got a law against this. Well, your head starts going in circles. You'll find they'll contradict each other, and that's why you might find that religion and religious systems that are based on very strict moral codes have a lot of conflict in interpreting those, because they're trying to figure out exactly how that applies to what isn't really a black and white situation. An easier way of going about that is relative morality. So you can agree that murder is bad, but what happens if one dark night you're walking down the street and suddenly someone comes out in front of you with a weapon, and there's a very real chance of you and or your family who's with you from being attacked. It's your right to defend yourself there, is it not? And to defend them. And surely there has to be some kind of way in which we can rationalize that choice to actually harm an individual for a greater good. I use the picture of the bread. The classic example, would you steal a loaf of bread if your family was starving and you had no money? And that's an example of relative morality where maybe the good that your choice does outweighs the bad that it does. And this is the more kind of free form, easy to fix yourself an ideal going with. It takes context into account. And the way that this is applied in a system or rule of law in the way that we have at the moment, where we've got a law, murder is bad, but then we have manslaughter, and you start to dilute the concept of murder and killing. And then the relative morality of our laws, also when you get to the point of sentencing and the punishment, the motivation behind it, the context behind your crime and behind your bad decision gets mitigated potentially if you steal a loaf of bread and there's no minimum sentencing guideline, then you might get let off even though you've been found guilty. And that's where our laws can start coming in there. There is, of course, individualism, egotism, hedonism, where you just go, screw it, I'm just going to do the best thing for me. Bit selfish, if I'm honest, but it's quite straightforward to figure out. It's not the process of things. It's that guy's in my way. I'm going to shoot him, and I'm going to go through. I'm going to steal whatever I like because screw property, screw other people. So that one is one that has very much big impact on others, but hopefully no one here is particularly that individualistic about their approach to what's right and wrong, or if you are, you hide it well. Utilitarianism is a really interesting way of looking at morals and of ethics. The kind of major proponents of this were Mills and Bentham back in the 1700s, and they were scientists, they were natural philosophers, and they looked at the world in terms of numbers, and they really wanted to rationalize things. They wanted to kind of quantify things. So they looked at a moral choice, and they thought, well, how can we actually have a specific rational way of approaching this? That means that the decision that's made is the best one. So Bentham looked at utilitarianism and utility and thought, well, you can look at it as, you could count something. It's metrics, as we might come across in software. So you can count the number of lives lost from one choice versus another if you've got a particularly bad way, a bad problem to solve. And I'll come on to something like that in a bit. You might look at pleasure. What thing gives someone the most pleasure, the most benefit? And you start doing the benefit analysis and say, well, if I make a choice in one way, more people will benefit than the other. Mills introduced the qualitative aspect of that. And Mills introduced the concepts that, well, maybe you should do something that provides the greatest pleasure overall. So if someone gets 2 units of pleasure from one decision, but one person gets 1 unit of pleasure, well, treat the person with 2. Make your better choice for them, because that way you've got a better overall amount of pleasure. The downside of that is if you get what's affectionately termed as a utilitarianism monster, or a utility monster, where something takes a lot of pleasure from your choice versus the normal one, and you get starvation from those others. So the example is if you get 1 unit of pleasure from a cookie, but this monster gets 100 units of pleasure, well, you're not going to get a cookie under that kind of qualitative approach. The other downside of utilitarianism is, as the graphic kind of suggests, because you're boiling stuff down to numbers, you're really tempted to do calculus on it. You're tempted to add stuff together. You're tempted to kind of weigh up pieces there, and you start removing the humanity from your choice, and you start removing the individuals affected by what you do, just because you boiled it down to the numbers. So while it's a very purist kind of approach, by going to the very rational numbers, it's irrational when you look at it from the people who are affected by the choices. And finally, what we're kind of always in the news at the moment, but the rights approach. This was Immanuel Kant, and you can see this is kind of a set of guidelines. So instead of saying this is the rule, this is thou shalt not murder, you can look at it from the point of view of the individual, and you can define your behavior and the effects of your behavior based on the rights that that person has. So at the moment, our very blue government really wants to get rid of some of these, or at least the outside influence on these. But Kant discovered or determined that there are a number of rights, among which the right to truth. You as a person, you do have the right to know the truth. If a doctor diagnoses you and figures out what's wrong with you, is it right for them to withhold that from you? Surely you need to know, because then the decisions that you as the individual can make from that can be based off fact and not off something you don't know. You know, if you only have 6 months to live and the doctor hasn't told you the truth on that, then you're going to get very surprised in half a year. The right to privacy, another big one at the moment that hopefully we all think about if we're doing stuff that customers use and the data that our customers put in. Surely no one needs to know that you have 6 months to live if you don't want them to know. That's something that really affects you, and I mean, it might affect outside of that, but that's under your control because it's something about you exactly. The right to not be injured, and that's emotional as well as physical, and that covers that kind of whole murder and kind of harm approach. So you have a right not to get hurt. And finally, for what's going up, the right to that which is agreed. So if you have a contract with someone, if you've agreed something with them, then you have the right to understand that that's going to be followed through. And you can see how that works on both sides. So instead of taking an approach where you kind of force the rules from the outside, you say, this is very specifically this is very specifically that, this is very specifically the other. You take a more holistic approach. You can kind of, although I'm not sure the analogy is perfect, you can kind of associate the law side with unit testing. It's very black and white. You put this in, you get this out. With acceptance testing, where you're looking at the environment for making a decision. You're looking at the environment for carrying on as such things. So a thought experiment. If I get this right, and if not, then you'll get confused. You are in a signal box. You're looking down at a train line, and you have a set of switches there. You can see on one side of the switch, it's a very short bit of track, and then there's a brick wall. On the other side, you can see that there's a family of 3 trying to cross those train tracks. Off in the distance, you can see, and you've been told about, a runaway train with a driver on it. And that's heading towards this set of switches. You have this one control, and you've got a decision to make, because the train can either go one way and hit the brick wall and kill the driver. Therefore, your decision to say it's going that way means that he will die. Or you can switch it the other way, and the train goes down the other set of the tracks, wipes out a family of 3. But the train driver is safe. So as the person who has the control over this, you have, unfortunately, in this very contrived example, you unfortunately have responsibility. You have the ability to change the outcome of what's coming up. You can make a decision that will change what happens. And so you have that moral obligation. You have a kind of a responsibility to everyone involved to make a decision. or do you? So absolute morality, well, thou shalt not kill. You'll be paralyzed, right? You're going to kill, or you're going to kill 3 times, but you're still killing. And both of those kind of decisions, those outcomes, really violates that, right? Relative morality, well, the train driver, not a very nice guy. In a legal sense, you know, he's been to jail a few times, he's made a few mistakes, he's come back, but, you know, perhaps you can start thinking about it that way. Or you might start thinking more, well, in this decision, in making this decision, I have no great alternative. So whichever choice I make is right based on that, because of that context. So whatever decision you make on there, you might think, well, in a relative set of speaking, whatever thing I've got to do, I have to do. And you made that decision because of the context. Yes, you've killed someone or some people, but at the same time, what else could you do? Individualism, well, I can just walk away, see which way the switches are going, and it's not my fault because I wasn't there when it happened, right? Which hopefully we're laughing because that's hopefully a ridiculous thing to do. But still, it's a choice. It's something you could do. By taking inaction, you're preserving yourself because you haven't got the guilt of choosing one life or another. You're just letting fate decide. But it's not very nice for the people involved in any way, shape, or form. The most interesting one around here is utilitarianism. You can look at it as the number of lives. Well, is it better to take 1 life or 3 lives? But then what if it's a family of 2 elderly aunts and an elderly uncle crossing? They've had great lives. This train driver is in his 20s and really is going someplace. Poor choice of words. Hopefully not to a big wall. More into them. But yeah, this person is bound to, if they go through, have a great quality of life. Because they're so young, they've got stuff to do. But then surely that person is going to have a horrible life because they've been on the front of the train that's gone through a family of 3, right? So you can start looking at the quality of the choice. You can start looking at what the best balance, the best outcome in a holistic sense might be. Again, impossible choice. Possible decisions to make, and hopefully none of us is ever going to be in this kind of situation to make those determinations. For all I know, we have no idea if one of the people being run over is going to be a brain surgeon, right? So these are all kind of ways in which we're going to approach this. Finally, rights. Does the train driver have a right to make a decision in this? Do you have the right? Does the train driver have the right to know the truth? Should the people on the tracks know the truth?
Why are they on the tracks? Do they have the right to be on the tracks?
That's a different decision that they made previous to this decision that you're making. But that's a fair enough point. Do they deserve this for going onto the tracks? Hopefully we don't think like that. But I'm not here to make judgments. I'm just here to help you make judgments. So we can start balancing all these things. The right to privacy. Well, maybe we shouldn't tell the family of 3 that the train person towards them has a person on it because they don't want that to be known. You have a right to privacy. Do you want to be known as the person who made this decision? And all sorts. So as an interesting way of kind of putting everything together, and just to show just the futility of my message, this is a really kind of an interesting position to put yourself in. So what's it all leading up to? Responsibility. I mentioned earlier that we build things. How many people here build things that could kill someone else? Sweet. I can go home.
Awesome.
How many people deal with private data? How many people deal with private data that if someone else found out might lead to murder? No?
If the
Maybe.
guy who stole it is a killer. Yes.
Yeah. Well, if someone's in witness protection and we write a witness, or I mean, a good example is Twitter. Well, I'm going to come on to that later, so I probably won't bring that up too much. But if someone is trying to hide and they've got their right to privacy, if someone is trying to hide and the very fact that they're found means that they can be harmed in any way, then surely it's your responsibility to help hold that back. The software that I work on traffics what some people would consider to be private data, because they put stuff on Twitter and they don't expect the stuff going on Twitter or these other social networks to be as open as it really is. They have a rights to that which is agreed that they've got to look into. There are examples of software that can kill people. There's the Therac 25, was a chemotherapy radiation machine, in the US in the 70s or 80s, and it had a software control panel for it. And a bug in it meant that the default dose would be sent through to the machine itself to irradiate the person underneath that machine, even if that's not what the operator dialed in, if the operator dialed the thing in fast enough, because there was a race condition between the interface and the actual thing receiving the number. So they could type in 10 where it was 100, hit enter because they're an expert user fast, and burn the person underneath. So you've got examples of where the stuff that we build can really affect people. We look at problems and we look at things that we want to solve, and as engineers, as developers, we go, that's really cool. I know a great way to connect this to this, and look at this wonderful thing that I built. I'm going to build something that hooks up the publicly available data on 999 calls to a map, so you can see when someone's getting a 999 call. And that's kind of cool, because you look at the thing and you go, wow, every 999 going up there. And as an engineer, as a developer, we can see how cool that solution is. But what are the ramifications of that? Should we be doing that in the first place? Or we could look at building profiles of people and take disparate pieces of information and connect them up together just to build a bigger picture of that person. But surely that person has a right to know that you know more about them than they thought they'd let you know. You've collected information from a load of places that they didn't realize had that much, and you're now making things worse for them in their private life, perhaps, because the information that you expose means that they can be targeted in a way that you didn't intend as a side effect. And it's not saying that you're going into these things trying to make these things happen, but it's an immense possibility. The things that we do amplify not only our abilities, but the abilities of the people who use the stuff we do. So we build tools and we think that's really cool. And yeah, when you use it for good, it can be a really good thing. But if someone can use it for bad, then they quite probably will at some point. And at that point, you've built something that can hurt someone else. So there are plenty kind of different facets about this. There's, well, in terms of responsibility, so I've gone on about software there, but in terms of determining risk and applying risk, we as developers, we as engineers, have a responsibility to the users of our stuff, either the hardware we build, the software we build, to determine risk for them, because they think that we have done that for them already. They're putting their, well, in the case of Challenger, they're definitely putting their life in our hands. The software we make for Challenger, the hardware we made for Challenger, astronauts, real lives depended on that. Does anyone know what happens to Challenger? Sorry, why it happens to Challenger? Why?
They were pressured to launch the shuttle even though it was too cold, and so the seals in the booster on the right there didn't respond fast enough, and they let the blast out. Oxygen technique.
So it was too cold for the seals in the booster. Now, the problem with that fact, that would be fine if they knew that they shouldn't be launching at that temperature, right? And if they knew that the seals couldn't operate at that temperature. But they did.
The managers of the room.
Yeah, the engineers started to push that up. Managers under commercial pressure and from pressure from above, from NASA, said, well, the likelihood of that is higher, fine, but let's keep going because there was a deadline to hit in launching this and they'd get financial penalties. NASA were under political pressure to launch. And as a result, that piece of information that would have been vital was suppressed. Now, did the engineers not speak up loud enough? Did they not push it to the right people? I believe the commission afterwards that found out that this was the case determined that that it was actually the engineering company at fault there. But you know, we start out as engineers and we become managers, and we have to start balancing those risks as a result. And while this is something that was clearly quite a dangerous endeavor, it was supposed to be risk assessed to within an inch of its life, and still that kind of stuff failed because of individual responsibility to help kind of whistleblow. So we do have a responsibility to look at the risk. What's the risk of this going wrong? What's the risk of this impacting, well, the company's bottom line, sure, but what's the risk of this impacting your colleagues? What's the risk of this impacting the customers? And are those risks just financial? Are they time? Or are they actually going to potentially hurt these people? If I got hacked tomorrow and someone got access to this database, what could someone do with it, and how can I start to work against that? So you can look at sort of mitigation, and it's really easy, you know, to do this kind of thing in software because we've got infinite possibilities and infinite kind of paths through what we build. But the example I've got up here is from Armatrix. I started mentioning ethics as a talk in February, and someone came up with the example of, well, if you make hammers, they've got a very specific, you know, you're not nailing to a bit of wood, that's what a hammer's for. But how can you stop someone from being hit on the head with a hammer? And I was thinking for a second, you know, you can get these saw blades that when you touch them, they have a deadbolt that having sensed the change in capacitance on the blade, the deadbolt slams into it, destroys the blade, but stops the whole thing dead, and you get just a tiny little scratch on your finger. Although the people who make those demonstrate with sausages and not fingers, so draw from that if you will. It's good for sausages. So, you know, going from a hammer, yes, I can think, well, you know, if it feels capacitance as it hits you on the head, then maybe you could have an airbag system that comes out. And, you know, that's quite a stretched example, but an easier one is one where we've got something that's inherently used for not so great things, a gun. And these are devices built by a company called Armatrix that tries to stop the gun from being used for purposes that it wasn't purchased for, which is a bit of a gray area anyway. But what you've got is a barrel lock, so you can stop an unauthorized person from just grabbing this gun, firing it anywhere. They're building systems where you have to be holding your watch. So again, assuming that you're on the side of the law or on the side of the person who should be holding this, there are systems to stop that from being taken off you and fired either at you or at other people, or just taken from your closet in the way that we've seen in a couple of cases in the US and used for that. There are even systems that say it will only let you fire the gun if it's aimed at a target, like a paper target. And those are ways in which, yes, you can take an inherently dangerous product, an inherently dangerous system, and try to mitigate against those. An easier one for us to understand, perhaps, as software engineers, is administration systems. So if we build a piece of software that our customers log into and access and put their data in, at some point, because we're managing those services, we probably want to have some kind of administration. And at some point you can see, Well, you might want to actually log in as that person, or you might want to actually go in there and change their balance and all sorts of things like that. But at some point, you can look at how that could be dangerous for them or dangerous for you as a company. If anyone, say if all the employees in your company had one level of admin access and could log in and do all these things, well, why does Dave in the corner need all of that? He just needs to look at the logs for a given customer. So we can start mitigating things by restricting access and finding ways in which, if you don't need access but someone else does, finding ways in which we can kind of hide that thing off with our ACLs and so on, and finding specific ways to code around the bad things that someone can do. And even though you might be the only person who has access to these things, and you can trust yourself to not do anything bad according to a customer, at some point you run the risk of someone being able to get in as you, or we're all human and you might find yourself at risk of temptation, and that's another demon that you want to be careful of. And you're either looking at, why have I built this in the first place, or how can I make this safer? So finding ways in which someone can game your perfectly valid overarching tools and dangerous tools and take those from you. Finding ways in which you can protect those and mitigate those circumstances is actually a nice kind of thought experiment. It's how you can actually reduce the risk of these things going wrong from the very powerful things that you created already. Good example, passwords. How many of us encrypt our passwords or hash our passwords? Good. How many of us would do that if all you were doing was storing someone's score? So you've got an online game, they want to know what their high score was. You log in and your high score is there, you play a game, you get a better high score, it just goes in. But you've got a username and password for that. Would you hash the password then? Yeah. So why do we do that?
In case if the password data was stolen, a lot of people use the same password across lots of services.
Now you, as the person who built that system, that high score, yeah, whatever. It doesn't mean anything. It's trivial. If someone broke into someone else's account on your system alone and got access to that high score, it's not going to end the world. It might be a slightly annoyed person that their scores changed, but that's it, right? It has no impact. But it does because people are people, and because people repeat their behavior through the things. So not only do you have to look at how your system can be used for bad, but you've got to think about how the data that you store can be used for bad, can be used in other ways, purely because of human instinct and human behavior, but thinking the ways in which, if all they do is store their house number with you, that's still quite valuable information, even if it's just the house number. So protecting that in any way you can, in such a way, really kind of provides an immune response for the whole ecosystem of web. So I'm making this up on the spot, that really didn't help. But if we all hashed our passwords, then password breaches wouldn't be a big problem, right? So I think that's where I was going with that. So social media is where my company comes in, like the company I work for. Up until recently, we were passing the whole of that sort of Firehouse through our stuff. We passed Tumblr and chunks of Facebook through. And one of the things there is that people understand privacy in relation to Twitter. They understand that I put my tweet up there, then it goes out to people looking at Twitter and people who follow me on Twitter. Some people believe that that's all it does, and that's their understanding of it. But in actual fact, Twitter then tries to sell that on to companies who are interested not in that individual, but in whole classes like that individual. The problem comes when a customer might come in and is really interested in the individual. So if you had an anonymous Twitter account in Uganda, and that person who tweets mentions the fact that they're gay in some way, then if that data flowing through contains any geographical information, and that data gets collected by the Ugandan government or bad actors in Uganda, suddenly that person's at risk. And that's a way in which Twitter, through its activities and through its software, has enabled the harm for someone else. The very thing that they've created for this great kind of vanity publishing system that's harmless suddenly becomes very, very dangerous to certain people. And while if that person has chosen to make themselves visible geographically, that's a very conscious decision you have to make as a Twitter user. What happens if you tweet an image with EXIF data in it by accident? Well, you don't know that your camera's got geo-IP in there, or geolocation, and adding in that long. Fortunately for Twitter, or rather for this example, Twitter actually stripped that geographic information from the images going through. But that's a really kind of interesting way of looking at how this toy can suddenly be turned against us. The other piece that we've got is, which is why the image, is we've now got a product called Pylon, which sits inside currently Facebook's network. A lot of the messages on Facebook, messages are the wrong word, so posts, comments, likes, flow through our filters. When our customers say, I want to record everything that mentions Coca-Cola, that goes into a bucket, and then they can go in and get some breakdown of that. Now, all the stuff going through Facebook, that's quite a lot of private stuff, right? That's stuff that people, that's quite a scary thing I've just said, for a lot of people, probably. So our challenge in delivering that was finding ways in which we could provide the utility of access to that data without actually risking anyone's kind of harm and well-being. So the first thing you look at is, well, the old model of, or the current model of working with Twitter data is you, the customer, gets all the raw data from Twitter. You get names and tweets and all sorts of stuff, and then you have to process it yourself. The danger there is, well, you might not be interested in the individual, someone else might be. The very fact that the mechanism exists for you to get that data in the first place means you've got to be careful about who gets hold of it. Well, what if you can't see that raw data in the first place and you only get the numbers? So the Pylon system processes a big index, and only gives you counts by gender or by age or by marital status or something like that. The interesting things for advertisers who really don't care about individuals, they care about people like you, not you. Try and give them just those numbers, the aggregates there. So no longer are they reading your posts, they're just seeing that you said something about Coca-Cola. We restrict the filtering, so you can't filter by a specific person. So you can't say Joe Bloggs, everything Joe Bloggs says, chuck it in there. Geographically, there's only so much that we go to. But then I go to the Uganda kind of example earlier, and how that could be dangerous for someone. Imagine that you had a secondary signal saying that someone was homosexual in Uganda, and you could still get that kind of information back out again. So again, we've got to go back to the drawing board, and the system that we've come up with is we redact everything where fewer than 100 unique authors are caught up in that filter. And so by degrading the signal, we're providing a less useful, perhaps, to our customers set of data, but it protects the individuals that are actually there providing that data. And because that people are profiting off that, people are profiting off the data flowing through that you're putting on, that you haven't explicitly agreed to them kind of profiting from. We've got that responsibility as people who work with that data to protect you, not only your private data, but the privacy of you yourself. And to go even further, we've had to willingly, I should say, and willingly with the Facebook engineers that we talked this over with, we've had to make it so that we quantize all the data coming out, so it's only rounded down to the nearest 100, so that you can't then cross-reference whole sets of people to figure out individuals again. And by taking these difficult decisions and by looking at this really cool thing we built and having to degrade it, we can protect the rights of the individual while driving our use cases at the end, and actually providing the utility to our customers while providing the utility of no harm or no actual privacy violation going through, protecting those rights of the customers of Facebook, for example, or anyone else who might apply this in the future. And that kind of starts to go to, I mean, I mentioned earlier about passwords and about private stuff. We've got the data protection laws here. And some of those are geared not to make our lives difficult as much as the DPA might, the Data Protection Act. But a big part of that is making sure that the data you collect not only is correct, because if it's incorrect, that could be really bad for someone, but also that the data you collect is relevant to what you do. You might be really interested in what someone's favorite computer game is, but if you're a medical company, that has nothing to do with you, unless you're a medical company building computer games. But looking at the suitability of the data you've got, that you process, that you hold for your customers, means that the level of risk that anything bad, untoward, outside of your control can happen with it gets reduced. And again, because these people are giving their data to you, they expect you, they have agreed with you through the ULAs, terms and conditions, or just an inherent social contract, they're expecting you to look after it. So if you can't look after that on their behalf, this thing that you hold, you have this responsibility to them, because you can potentially cause that harm that I was talking about earlier. Finally, the last one before I close with a kind of more meaningful thought experiment is Edward Snowden is really interesting. Who thinks he's a hero? Who thinks he's a traitor? Who doesn't care? Interesting.
I think more hero than traitor. I don't think he's a traitor at all.
No. He himself, he makes no claims either way.
Yeah.
Or at least publicly he doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure he really brags internally. So it's an interesting one, whistleblowing. It's an interesting one. Obviously he's got this access to this vast conspiracy, if you like, but this vast system that engineers have built. People like us have built these things that make these things possible. And he was there using them. And he was able to see how that this could violate the rights of the individual, could violate the ability for someone to carry on their lives, and can provide real harm. I mean, there's a lot of talk about metadata collection and how that's, it's only metadata. It's not actually real data about someone. But the thing is, if you start building up a picture of relationships between people, what happens, quite randomly, that two people you talk into a pub one night are both independently terrorists, right? It's a reasonable conclusion by someone knowing that fact, even if you don't, that terrorist A and terrorist B are talking to unknown person C, therefore unknown person C is very likely to be a terrorist. But the fact that we only have the metadata about the situation doesn't help there. You know, you haven't got the rest of the picture. And that shows how that kind of danger of collecting that stuff can be quite real for people. So Edward Snowden had this choice, and he actually made a very specific choice. He had been a contractor for the NSA. He went off, worked somewhere else, and then made the decision to go back in there to collect the information to then share with the world. So yes, we as the people who are subject to all these surveillance and all these kind of discussions, we have the right to privacy. We have the right to the truth. So we had the right to the truth that our right to privacy was being violated in a way that one might not expect from a government or hope from a government. So in that way, the choices that he made under the rights system that we discussed earlier was actually driven pretty well. You know, that showing that privacy has been violated, and the decisions he's made have potentially harmed some people. He's potentially harmed the any kind of tech contractors whose names might have come up in the documents that he's released. He might have harmed any agents who've been caught up in any transcripts from stuff he's done and so on. But at the same time, he's protected the people whose rights were violated in the first place, and hopefully opened up some people's eyes to do these kind of things. At the same time, didn't the NSA have a right to privacy? Silence. They do, you know, as nasty as we might think. They had some kind of that. They had the right to which that which is agreed. He probably signed an NDA or 5 and got security clearance to do these things. Well, he agreed to do these things, and he broke those. But under the utilitarian kind of things, while he's injured a relatively small group of people in the NSA, and he's injured a number of governments, there are billions of people he's actually probably made kind of benefited from the back of this. So hopefully we're not all thinking, or we're not all in a position that he's found himself in. But again, that's somewhere where we're party to information, and we're party to violations of the rights that we've been talking about, and violations of ethics and morality, that hopefully we can get the courage to stand up and speak out. So again, having talked about this in February, someone gave me a really interesting thought. If you wrote a piece of software that was really useful, it was the best thing you've ever written, most beautiful code, fully unit tested, like all our code is, continuously deployed, continuously integrated, it's perfect. It does the most fantastic thing in the world. Unfortunately, it can also do the most evil thing in the world, but only if someone chooses to do the most evil thing in the world with it. Would you delete the software? Anyway, that's it. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts for discussion? Have I left you on the stand side?
It's a lot of thought-provoking stuff, so it's a bit
Oh yeah, sure.
important to like digest it, I guess, before more questions would probably emerge. For me, anyway.
It's not easy stuff. It's really heavy for a Tuesday night as well. I appreciate that. But thanks for listening. If you want to discuss them any further, you can find me at these places. And I'm going to be hanging around for any kind of questions or pizza and beer later. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Chris, once again. I think we can all agree that Chris has given us some food for thought tonight, and quite a lot of things to reflect on in our day-to-day activities. So before we close tonight's meetup, I'll ask Michael to come round over here, and I'll ask Chris to do the honours to pick 3 winners tonight of our
So now if I
prizes.
have my own ticket, would it be the moral decision to put it in? It's very individual.
I have another gift that someone who wanted to come tonight. The guy that wrote this book, he's he's from America, and
Fantastic.
he's in Glasgow tonight, but he couldn't make it, so he asked me to go and pick up the book.
Thanks very much. I suppose we've got 4 winners then tonight. Yeah. Thank you so much for this. Okay, first winner.
The first winner is number 57.
Woohoo! So I suppose we've got the choice: JetBrains voucher, this book, or the book. Right, okay. There you go. Okay.
Next up, on a theme, number 50.
Okay. Yay! And you're getting the JetBrains voucher. Well done.
Already got one.
You've already got one.
I've got all of the stuff that's there.
Right, okay. So are you going to take this decision and donate it back to the pool of prizes? Sure. Okay, great. Okay. Okay.
Up in 10, number 60. That's me.
Yay!
Really
Okay, and the number 2 then, please.
I've got number 62.
62. Yay! Okay, and the last one.
And number 46. Oh, yeah.
Yay! You did it. Well done. Okay, so just distribute the prizes.